Welcome to Happy Times and Places. It's me, Toby Haydock, jumping into as many modes of transport as possible in order to enjoy a Doctor Who episode chosen by a friend of mine who then nominates their favourite thing about it. I have to see if I can guess what that is.
Hi there, this is Annie Wallace here. I play Sally Sinclair on Channel 4's Hollyoaks. So, when Toby asked me which story would I like to talk about, I had a big think, and I have chosen Planet of the Spiders.
Well, it's dark. I'm not wearing sunglasses. I've got a full tank of petrol and I've got a car, another car, a car that flies, a little helicopter thing, hovercraft boat, and a long journey to see if I can enjoy a story I've hitherto had a bit of a downer on. Like many Doctor Who that I discovered after reading the Target novel, you know, there was a big gulf between my expectations and, you know, the delivery. And I've rehabilitated a good number of stories, I think, in my mind. And some I thought were okay, like the Sea Devils, that the last time I watched it, I absolutely adored. But there are also stories that I thought were really quite poor. And I would say this and Planet of the Daleks, although I actually enjoyed Planet of the Daleks when we did it running through corridors, that book I wrote with Rob Shearman, when we came at it within the era and watched it in blocks. But I think because of the weight of expectation of what Planet of the Spiders has to do, and because of certain things that happen as the story goes on and the production, shall we say, frays around the edges, it's a story I will have to learn to love as we do this, if I can do it. And I have my lovely dog friend Bernard by my side. Maybe he will give me a new perspective. But let's try it. Annie Wallace is along for the ride, star of Hollyoaks, wonderful actress, lovely person, and I'm really grateful that Annie has lent her name, kudos, and time to this project. And I couldn't think of anyone better to help me learn to love a story that I know people who watched at the time are very fond of, but I do not have that because I'm much younger than those people. So let's see what happens in episode 2 of Planet of the Spiders in 3, 2, 1. I do like the opening bit of the title sequence, which isn't then replicated in the Tom Baker version. Pertwee I really loved as a kid when they repeated, you know, the couple for the Five Faces of Doctor Who, the Three Doctors and Carnival of Monsters. You know, he was one of the old Doctors, the classic, the four classic, the unimpeachables. And I, when I discovered the era, I think it's because it was quite recent history. So the things that we had cast aside, like some of the haircuts and the flared trousers, seemed slightly more embarrassing than perhaps the 60s stuff, which had dated in a different way because it was slightly further away. So it wasn't, you know, it wasn't nagging, snapping at our shoulders, going, you know what you lot recently look like, and you know, I was scared of flared trousers and bad CSO and sort of haircuts like Mike Yates's were not things that I liked the idea of my school friends seeing, and much of my identification of Doctor Who was about whether I could show it to my school friends without being embarrassed, because I suppose one conducts one's life worrying about what other people think, and you know, the Buddhism in this story is a good riposte to that. So I'm looking forward to embracing that stuff about clarity of mind and not worrying about what's happening outside. And that's a great image, isn't it? The spider on the back. It's no accident that that's a beautiful shot, actually, and the lighting in this cellar is great. But the idea of the spider on the back as a physical presence and as a metaphorical representation of, you know, menace and dark thoughts and all of that, is rather lovely. I think the spider on the back is a great thing. And that was a lovely shot of Lupton. I don't really think of Barry Letts as being in the top tier of Doctor Who directors. I think he is a bit too wedded to CSO. And Roland Warne, the costume designer, does like purples and blues, which is appropriate, seeing as for this story, because Metabilis has a lot of blue. But I wonder then, this is a different spider, the one that Professor Clegg saw in his mind, isn't it? It's got a sort of slightly transparent, bulbous taily bit. Was it because wasn't the thing was that they built a spider that was deemed to be too convincing, and it was sort of sent back, and Bernard Wilkie, the head of visual effects, also the visual effects designer of this, was kind of told, yeah, you've done too good a job. But I remember there being an article in Doctor Who magazine, which was Matt Irvin with Boris the Spider, and Boris the Spider was a thing. So this was one of the stories where the visual effects themselves had their own sort of little sub story, and it was a way into some of the behind the scenes chaps. And I remember that article in Doctor Who magazine of Matt Irvin, who's always been a great. He's the sort of spokesperson for the visual effects department of the BBC. He would be on Swap Shop and kids television and things like that. He actually rang me at my home once when I'd written a letter to the BBC visual effects department. I'm sure that's a story I can tell on another occasion when it's actually a story that Matt has a credit on, maybe. Unless I run out of things to say during this, but I'm going to try my hardest not to. Although this is, yes, but of course this is the famous episode that is a series of car chases where we have to, we'll have to talk about how important, plot is. Again, I think if television is there to entertain and to keep us interested, it doesn't only have to do that with plot, which is why I don't mind sort of showy direction or long special effects sequences if they catch the eye, if they divert us. That's what entertainment is, and that's why television, it's a visual medium. If there's plenty going on screen, we don't necessarily have to be thinking about it and joining the dots of plot development or character development or thematic rigor. You can just go, oh look, it's a Minimoke. I think that's what the helicopter thing is called. He's got an excellent face, hasn't he, John Dirth? He's got a very odd gait. He's got quite a sort of shambling. I imagine he's racked by kind of illness. I know that he had a drink problem, and I know John Kane speaks very kindly of Barry Letts by going, here's a guy with a reputation in the business for being a drinker, and that means that people would sometimes be reluctant to employ him, and it's a fickle business because some people who are for whatever reason on whom the fates are shining are forgiven all sorts of drunken exploits because they're geniuses, and then but if you're not lucky enough to have been decided upon as a genius or whatever, you're a bit of a shadow and probably best avoided, and I got the impression that maybe there was a bit of that with John Dirth, and Barry Letts, because he was a kind man, went, well, no, I'll put him front and center and give him a shot. And he's got an excellent voice. He's brilliant as Boss in The Green Death. He was the Iago to the Othello of Donald Wolfett. So he'd got good stage codes, but similar looking to James Mason. And I know Barry Letts said once that Dirth was quite bitter about that. And that's no way to be as an actor, because you just go mad then as a performer. Let's break off from that, because I love Sergeant Benton. I love the fact that Sergeant Benton makes the second best cup of coffee to Mrs. Samuel Pepys. And I love that Pertwee is an enjoyer of things like cups of coffee and cheese and wine and all of that. And I love Benton. It's just sad that this is Benton's last Pertwee episode, really. He really does deserve to come back in in episode 6. But he gets a nice little shot in this. He gets to have a little bit of jokey stuff because he doesn't realise that the Brigadier is there and all of that. And all the bits that Benton does well, which are, relaxing when he doesn't think authority is round and having a bit of fun, and then being a bit wounded and slightly apologetic when he discovers that actually authority is there and he's supposed to be being a soldier. But also being the loyal factotum. He is, and my dog is here sitting next to me. Benton is I think closer than canine even that Doctor Who gets to a dog, because he's loyal and he's faithful and he's really, really happy if he's done a good job. And he'll if the push comes to shove, he'll put himself in harm's way for you. It's a pretty, sorry, Tommy, but it's a pretty gruesome medallion. But there you go. I don't know anything about fashion. My son now has a chain around his neck there, so maybe they're coming back in. Fashion is cyclical, isn't it? I remember John Levine in an interview with Doctor Who magazine saying that he'd suggested to John Kane to add the second go to bed as he walks away. And it is a nice little touch. And that John Levine was quite pleased, because John Kane is a hugely respected Royal Shakespeare and Company actor who'd been involved in probably the most important Shakespeare production of the century, which is Peter Brook's production of A Midsummer Night's Dream, in which he played Puck, which is, as prize apart as you can get. And it was the Midsummer Night's Dream that was all done on trampolines and acrobatics, and all that sort of thing. And it was a hugely important piece of theatre that made a huge mark on the way that we do Shakespeare. And yeah, John Kane was a key part of it. He's part of theatre history, and also wrote loads of episodes of Terry and June. Isn't that brilliant? I was Puck in the most important Shakespeare production of the 20th century, and I wrote most of Terry and June and Phoenix in the Carpet. I love that you can have that kind of career. But what a great actor he is. And I think he's wonderful in this. And it's, I know a lot of people don't like Pertwee for his awful stuff, like this bit where he sort of completely ignores Sarah, and she goes, "No, come on, I'm trying to tell you this thing," and actually, but you could almost say it's deliberate, isn't it? Because the whole thing about this story is that Pertwee is punished for his foibles, and you can't be punished for foibles you don't have. So a lot of the things we kind of say we don't like about Pertwee are kind of deliberately there, and they are sort of oddly likable in a way, because he's such a big, imposing figure. Because he's such an effortlessly sort of large personality without being a sort of showy offy one. I know he wears, Pat Gorman alert, by the way, and Pat Gorman doing some good acting. Credited as soldier. I think he should be credited as mechanic, but that's a whole different story. But nice to see Pat there as again somebody, gathered for the Pertwee valedictory shindig, and another regular face from the era popping up to do his bit. I don't think of Pertwee as being a show-off, because it fits him like a glove. There are some people who wear leather jackets. I'm not going to paraphrase Larry Turner, but she does say, isn't it, that Jimi Hendrix and John Pertwee can get away with those outfits and not really anybody else. But it's true, in other hands, those outfits and that presence of Pertwee would look too try-hard, would look a bit self-consciously wacky. It all fits Pertwee like a glove. As does that sort of slightly testy, patronising thing that he does, and yet I think he kind of gets away with it. I don't know why. Oh, I also like the way, by the way, that John Dirth looked for his unit pass when Pat Gorman asked him for him. He did it really sort of naturally, going, "Oh yeah, I've got it here somewhere," and then zapped him. I thought it was, got over the slightly annoying stuff that you have to do of, somebody breaking into a top secret establishment in the universe. I thought it really sold that and made it rather rather convincing because of the very naturalistic way that he did it and had that. It's probably not how you would exchange, not how somebody in a top secret military establishment would greet somebody just wandering around. But I bought that whole interaction. I think that was very nicely done. I like Sarah's outfit. I love Sarah's outfit later. I love the red and white striped thing. But I like her outfit here. Isn't she? I love the joy that she has in everything. She's so good. She's so good on every level. And so beautiful. I actually rather like Lupton's tweed jacket. Is he the only Doctor Who villain in it? I've got a tweed jacket. That was given to me. It was somebody's granddad's. I'm the sort of person that if your granddad dies and he's got a jacket, instead of throwing it away or giving it to Oxfam, you offer it. You go, I think Toby might like that. So most of my clothes throughout my life have been inherited because I've never really had much money, and people have always taken pity on my wardrobe, but also known that I'll probably accept things that most other people wouldn't. I don't care. He's pointing the gun quite well, Nicholas Courtney. There, he always had that thing, didn't he, of saying he didn't really like firing a gun. But he's done that all right. Although I would argue that the command to stop him being met with all right, well, I'll start shooting at him then. But that's a wonderfully John Pertwee Doctor Who thing. Said, stop shooting, you'll hit the car. And the Whomobile looks great. And I love the way that when they drive off, John Pertwee stands on the side of Bessie. Only John Pertwee could. That just looks $1 million to me. That is Doctor Who to me, but it's John Pertwee's Doctor Who. He looks so... Isn't he such an elegant man of action? He really is. And as I say, it doesn't seem to try hard. There's nothing self-conscious about it. He absolutely inhabits that elegant, dandy man of action. And that's quite a combination of words to be the sort of human manifestation of. And I love the way that the Whomobile goes at such a lick. I remember being, extremely impressed at the speed at which it was going. And Bessie is a joy, isn't she? I love Bessie. I love the fact that Bessie is called Bessie. And here we've got Pertwee with his helicopter. And do you know what? If Pertwee loves his gadgets, which he does, I think giving over half an episode to a whacking great chase with all these different things is the least you can give him. And as I say, I don't think everything has to be plot. Now, there are some Doctor Who stories where you go, well, not a line of this script is wasted. It's rigorous and fastidious and blah, blah, blah. But I think it's also, James Bond has loads of car chases and action sequences. Now, Doctor Who could never do anything like that because, every shot is $1 million like that in a James Bond film. They're ingeniously done, aren't they? But this is the best you can do, on a children's tea time family TV show budget. And in that regard, this is kind of $1 million. We've got this brilliantly designed space car going at quite a lick, and Doctor Who in a mini helicopter, and now we've got a comedy policeman, Chubby Oates, who was quite a filthy comedian, I believe, very much of the old school. I probably wouldn't have really enjoyed much of what Chubby Oates did as a comic, but but that's okay. That's okay. I don't have a really filthy sense of humour, but anyone that gets up on stage and does what they do, it's not as easy as it looks. And he was highly regarded by a lot of the old school lot. I know that the last photograph of him alive, June Whitfield and Roy Hudd are both guffawing because he'd done a show in the daytime, I think, and then did he die on a park bench or did I make that up? I'm sure somebody he had a heart attack. I think he was only 63. I thought he was much older than that. But he was a stand-up comic. And the last picture is of June Whitfield and Roy Hudd guffawing, and then he went off and I think had a few drinks and I think keeled over on a park bench and was taken to hospital and died. But having, hopefully with the laughter still ringing in his ears, and he did loads of. But he was also a flatmate of Kelvin Mackenzie and taught him to type. So much as I admire Chubby's contribution to the world of comedy, I wish he hadn't taught Kelvin Mackenzie to type, because I think the world might have been a better place. For listeners abroad, Kelvin Mackenzie was the editor-in-chief of the Sun newspaper. At the time, it was at its most egregious and is now quite a beastly and, I would say, slightly hypocritical public commentator. Anyway, let's not get into that. Chubby Oates, we all have our... Chubby Oates represents much... He's a terrible actor as well, but I think it kind of... I don't think it would work quite as well if he wasn't. He's definitely giving the sort of performance that a sort of day player of that time in sort of various sort of low budget movies or the odd episode of this and that might give, where there's a slight flatness behind the it's sort of slightly heightened and yet slightly flat. It doesn't have any grandiosity about it, but yet it kind of works. It kind of adds to the charm. And I'm not one of those people who's it's so bad it's good, because I think that's I think that's a little bit self-regarding sometimes. I like stuff that's good because it's good. I don't get any joy in patronising something. But I'll allow the sort of reverse alcohol, and the way that he cocks his hat is pure day player. Beautiful. Well done, Chubby. I found him thoroughly entertaining this time around. Good for you, Chubby. And the fact he's called Chubby Oates as well. You wouldn't get an actor called Chubby Oates these days. God bless you, Chubby. I hope he's having fun in the great... I don't feel very well. Well, wow, that's odd, because I've always sort of thought that was a bit that didn't quite work because it wasn't quite good enough. I'm thoroughly entertained by Chubby Oates this time round. But also I was, oh God, my skin crawled at the CSO that rendered the Whomobile. Again, I think we're in slightly remastered for DVD territory here. I think the tinkerers of the of the celluloid, it's not celluloid, is it? Whatever it is, the VT Warlocks have got their erasers out and perhaps made the fringing slightly less egregious. Can't do that with the haircuts though, can you, sweethearts? But also that it's obviously because of the lighting, I think, and the fact that it's on video when it's CSO'd. That's automatically a clash. Video laid onto film is oil and water, really. But also it's the lighting means it looks a slightly different colour too. He's got a very curious shambling gait, hasn't he? I think I started to talk about that. I think he's not. I don't think he's the healthiest of men at this stage, Dearth. And when you look at actors in things now, where every sod goes to the gym, and you can't even play a middle-aged dad without looking like you go 5 times a week lifting weights and being on the keto diet, which I've talked about that before. But he's just fallen over and they've kept it in. But he is the other end of the scale, where I don't think he could outrun a sloth, really, because he's not what you'd call the most athletic of quarries. Now, this is Michael Pinder, who's an actor that you might go, I've never seen him in anything before, because he's not an actor. It's Terry Walsh, in an excellent jumper. Of course, Terry Walsh is going to fall into something, and he's fallen into the water. But Michael Pinder, who's this guy here, who's just got zapped, he's not an actor. He's the guy that owned the boat or the hovercraft, and he gets a credit and a line. And I'm sure there's shenanigans going on there, because would he have been? I don't think he'd have been a member of Equity. And I don't think you normally, can we borrow a thing? Yes, so long as I can be in it. I think, most of the time there'd be like, no, you're all right. We'll just, pay you the usual BBC usage fee, and thank you very much. So, but anyway, Michael Pinder is the guy who owns the boat or the hovercraft or both, but plays Mr. Hopkins, who has one line and then gets zapped. So that's an interesting curio. A friend of mine has, I think, tracked him down. He's still around, so we must ask him. We must have a chat with Michael Pinder, the boatman, who, yes, is never in any other television programs as an actor because he's not an actor. He's the boat guy. Now, this stuff all looks good. And I remember, in the book, I remember the chapters of the book, the ending of each chapter of the book being really, really exciting, and I could sort of work out where the episodes ended. And this chase is quite a lengthy section and quite an exciting section in the book. I know a lot of people sort of go, well, they do all this chase, and then at the end he just disappears. But actually, it was like, we nearly got him, and then we didn't, rather than just that was a complete waste of time. So, I think I suppose it depends what you feel about this sort of thing. I have total sympathy with anybody that goes, it's a bit it's nice seeing him so genuinely wet, though, isn't it? And that feels all real, Pertwee with the sort of crystals of water sticking to his mane and slightly blurring the camera. It feels real, And now I remember this being amazing. When I first saw it, I couldn't quite believe it. One, I didn't know that hovercrafts could go on land, but this comedy running over the tramp, played by Stuart Fell, he makes a very great tramp, doesn't he? I remember being absolutely flabbergasted when I first saw this. So here it is, and you go, I'm not... what? Hang on, he's run him over! Because I didn't know how hovercrafts worked, but obviously the propellery bit is on the top. So, but your instinct is to go no, because you'd get either chopped to bits or squashed or something like that. But no, it's called a hovercraft. Idiot. But I remember that being a really shocking moment for me of kind of, oh my god. I still think it's rather fun, but this time it certainly didn't recapture the first time I saw it, where it seemed to me like a real bolt and moment out of the blue. And so Pert was, so now we're going to get to the end of the episode where it's basically been this protracted chase that comes to nothing. But that shows that the spiders can materialize. Well, we already know that we can materialize things. They can materialize things actually. So it's not a development really. But yeah, I can understand both camps. I can understand the camps that go, well, that was a fun celebration of all of Pertwee's desire for gadgetry, and also that was really self-indulgent and doesn't help the plot one bit. But it's well done. I mean, I think it feels slightly more comfortable watching it now because there's not that terrible disconnect between the studio and location when the Whomobile is laid onto the film footage, which I seem to recall looking much worse than that. When it was first out there. Well, that's a big debate in and of itself. Should restoration be making stuff look better to the modern eye? I'm a bit of a purist. I don't like the changing of the day for night in that jarring shot in the chase. But I'm not sorry, I have to say, to see the back of the really poor CSO. So, we're all hypocrites, aren't we? Well, maybe just I am. Maybe I'm just a hypocrite, in which case I'm very sorry. But what... so what do I like most about that? And also, I don't want to blow the fact that Annie and I are currently... I'm currently in the lead, because Annie and I said the same thing for episode 1. It is Sergeant Benton's last episode of the Pertwee era, and he does get a couple of great... He gets a lovely comedy moment, and he's the one that warns the Doctor about Lupton, and he gets the sort of Cheshire Cat smiling about making the second finest cup of coffee next to Mrs. Samuel Pepys. I don't know why, I love the fact it's Mrs. Sam, of all the people to be your rival in the caffeinating stakes. I was actually rather taken by Chubby Oates this time round, but he's not always done it for me, to be fair. But and as I say, I'm slightly reluctant to be, to be patronising of going, well, the fact that he's actually not all that brilliant is kind of part of the charm. I'm always reluctant to go down that path because I'm not a talking head show where they go, well, it was so bad it was good, because I don't believe that. I believe that Doctor Who was good because it was good. But that has sort of added to it the charm of that moment. Oh, and the person he was speaking to at the other end of the radio was Barry Letts. That was Barry Letts' voice. So we have Barry Letts writing, directing, producing, and acting in an episode of Doctor Who. And it's episode 2 of Planet of the Spiders. And I love you, Barry Letts. I mean, I'm sure we will be discussing him at length. I mean, it's not much of a discussion, is it? It's just me rabbiting on, but you know what I mean. As this story progresses, because his presence looms large, and rightly so. He's one of the great figures of Doctor Who, Barry Letts, and what a wonderful man he was. I'm very, very privileged to have been in his orbit. What a great man. What a decent man. So, what is my favourite thing? I think it has to be the fact, and I've got a soft spot for Sergeant Benton, and I know John Levene is a divisive figure, and I know John has occasionally done and said things that make you go, John, what are you doing? But he's a complicated fellow. His heart is in the right place. But sometimes his brain takes him to other ones. But I love, but I'm very fond of him. But irrespective of that, I love Sergeant Benton. I think Sergeant Benton consistently provides the moments of magic, and even the sort of flaggiest, middle episode of a slightly meandering Pertwee episode, Benton is on hand to provide just that little moment of magic, that little moment of charm, that little moment that only John Levene can do. So I think the fact that it's Benton's last episode of the Pertwee era, of which he has been such a key part, and the fact that within that episode he gets a comedy moment, gets a little bit of action, and he gets to make the second best cup of coffee. Don't you love that? The second best cup of coffee in the universe. That is going to be my moment for episode 2. That's a very personal one. I think I might be losing out now. I think Annie might well like the Minimoke or the Whomobile. The Whomobile is great. Yeah, I used to think it was called the Wombile. I'd see it written down. I thought it was called the Wombile until one day. But I used to think W.H. Smith was called Wordsmith. And I knew there was a shop called W.H. Smith. I just thought I'd never seen it. I think I've said this in a podcast. And I remember saying, I don't know how to pronounce that. Wordsmith. What's a funny name for a shop? I remember once visiting my nan and walking down Newbury High Street. And it suddenly struck me, oh, it's W.H. Smith. And it's same with the Wombile. I was like, what's the Doctor Who's car's called the Wombile? And then, oh no, it's Whomobile. It's the Whomobile. I think I might have even had to have heard it out loud, because for ages I thought it was called the Wombile. And I'm impressed with how speedily it goes. It is a pleasant surprise, because I think we're quite often used to vehicles in Doctor Who that can look quite impressive and then go at a snail's pace, or have to look speeded up, a la Bessie in The Time Monster, which looks a bit naff and a bit of a cheat. It actually genuinely looked like it was pounding along there. And I do like the moment where the hovercraft runs over the tramp, just because that was such a shock when I first saw it. And I like the way the hovercrafts move. They look pretty cool, hovercrafts, don't they? But so Annie might choose any of those things. And so I mentioned them just so I could feel sorry for myself for being so near and yet so far. But I'm sticking with Sergeant Benton's cup of coffee.
So, part 2, what do we have there? Well, it has to be the chase. It has to be the chase What can you not do? Something that basically takes almost half the episode and was probably entirely written in for John Pertwee's fun and benefit. So they start off with uh, Lupton being the baddie driving Bessie away. And then, of course, it goes, oh, good heavens. The doctor goes up in a gyrocopter, and then he takes to the skies in the Whomobile with a bit of aid of CSO, or chroma key as we call it now. And then, of course, Lupton goes to a hovercraft, and so the doctor goes on to a speedboat, and it's literally a chase through land, sea, and air, which culminates with Lupton disappearing. Where's he gone? Oh, and that's the cliffhanger. So that's episode 2.
Yeah. I mean, I should have kept it simple, shouldn't I? It's a big old chase. It's a celebration of Pertwee's love of gadgets, and it's pretty well done. And if you're of a mind not to like Planet of the Spiders, you can point to the chase as a shortcoming. And I'm sure I've done that in the past. But actually, watching it now in the zone that I'm in now and with the mindset I'm in now, I've found that perfectly good fun. I mean, obviously, it's a slightly different experience because I'm chuntering all the way through it. But it worked for me. But I think I couldn't have in all conscience because of my vacillating relationship with this story, and the fact that, you know, I've felt pretty uncharitable towards it in the past. I think it would be dishonest of me to pick one of the things that I've been uncharitable about, even only mentally, you know, only to myself, and suddenly go, oh yeah, well, it's got to be the chase, because I think previously I've probably gone on that blooming chase, which actually I thought worked really, really nicely. Gyrocopter. Is the gyrocopter the same as a mini moke? Don't write in, I don't care. Where have I got mini moke from? But it's definitely a gyrocopter. And I'm sure, I noticed when Lupton took off, I'm sure in the modern series they'd have made him swerve towards them, and you'd have had the sort of, he nearly chops their heads off with the thing. But, you know, that would have been really dangerous and hard to do in the way that the program was made then. But you'd probably add that slight level of jeopardy to that moment now, because you can actually pull that stuff off, you know, a lot quicker, and, you know, in more controlled environments, and you know, you might do a cutaway in the studio or something like that and seamlessly meld it. But anyway, I just noticed that as an option that you would do to add to the drama now. I don't mind choosing Sergeant Benton's Cup of Coffee because I love it and I love him, and I think it was a more honest choice for me, even though of course I completely understand and sympathise, and, you know, can see perfectly why Annie has chosen the chase, which is the standout moment of the episode, really. So in terms of playing the game, I've just been really stupid. I've been I've been slightly slow and half-witted, but I've kept my sense of humour, and that is appropriate. But that I did those things and chose Sergeant Benton, because that's him in a nutshell. So that's me signing off on behalf of Sergeant Benton in the Pertwee era. I'm proud to have chosen him for episode 2 because he was such an important part of the era, and I do really like what he does. And he, a bit like Chubby, you know, he's not the best actor, John Levine, but as Benton, I think he is perfect. I think the fact that he is who he is, and the fact that the performance has the slight limitations that it has, actually informs the character in a way, and that there's an element of Benton and John Levine of somebody, you know, who's slightly in order, maybe feeling slightly out of their depth, trying their very hardest, and that's something that I think we always admire. I think it's quite a British thing of sort of somebody perhaps not having all of the equipment to do this thing, but giving it a damn good try anyway, and you emerge, I think, with a bit of, you know, with your honour intact, and a bit of admiration for you know, for doing that in a sort of plucky and likable way. So that's why I like Sergeant Benton. And again, I hope that doesn't feel too patronising, because I don't like that thing of going, yeah, I like it because it's a bit naff. It's not that at all. It's more that I like it because it represents somebody, really giving it their all, and like Doctor Who, not necessarily having all the things to carry off the ambition of what the script is asking it to do, but having a go anyway, and using a bit of invention and a bit of charm and some bloody hard work to make it as good as it can possibly be. And I think that's what John Levine does with his performance as well. So to me, John Levine and Sergeant Benton are an utter encapsulation of the charm and the humour and the likability of Doctor Who. And I think it is charming and funny and likeable. And so that's why I chose it for that. But now, because I know you're creeping up on me, just before you get to me, I'm going to disappear, and you'll find that my seat is empty and I'm no longer here. Well, thanks ever so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock. My special guest this time around is BAFTA Award-nominated Hollyoaks actress Annie Wallis, who can be found on Twitter at Annie Wallis. I'm grateful to Annie, of course, and to the many patrons who make these podcasts possible. And they include Rhys Williams, Chris Williams, Rich Wiggins, Kevin West, Peter Ware, Gavin Ware, Alistair Wallace, Jeff Walker, Gary Wales, Lee Wakerley, John Turner, Fanman Sang, Sidney Truitt, Jason Thompson, Dr. Gary Thomas, Paul Taylor-Greaves, Adam Stone, Chris Stokes, David Spofford, David Spencer, Richard Smith, Trevor Smith, Brian Sinclair, Paul Shields, John Sheehan, Frank Shales, Keith Say, Edward Salt, Samuel, Tom Selinsky, Gavin Rymel, and John Rumfitt. The music is by Dave Gates, and the podcast artwork by Dylan Patterson. Would you like to be added to that list of names? Well, that's one of the bonuses of being a Patreon. They've all gone to patreon.com/Toby Haydock and committed to pay for as little as £3 a month to get bonus releases, exclusive material, and mentioned in the credits. You can also get a 10% discount if you sign up for a year in advance. Monthly commitment is a bit of an ask, isn't it? You can go to kofi.com/Toby Haydock, which is the internet equivalent of chucking a few pennies into the hat of a busker, should you feel so inclined. It means you don't always have to do it when you hear their music, but sometimes you might think, oh, my pockets are a bit heavy. Let's relieve them of some of the burden and help that passing minstrel. Don't know if I said, but he was called Arthur, really, Chubby Oates. He wasn't born chubby. Well, he might have been born chubby, and that's why he was then named Chubby. But he was christened Arthur. It was Arthur Oates, but Chubby Oates was no, Arthur Oates was Chubby Oates' name, but I think everyone knew him as Chubby. Is that enough for a post-credit sequence? I think it is. I'm quite busy. I sound quite busy. The other half is away, and I feel like I should be up to no good. Do you know what I mean? You sort of think, it seems a waste of this time if I don't at least leave the odd cup lying around and perhaps walk around eating cornflakes in my pants. I mean, I don't particularly fancy doing any of those things, but I feel like it's a waste of an opportunity if I don't. So I might go and put my shoes somewhere bad, just for fun. All right. Bye.